Hey guys, here we are, chapter 21, section 2. We're going to talk about dealing with solid waste. It's been created. What do we do, if you will? We really need to come up with a sustainable approach to our solid waste. Now, ways to go about that, right? What do we do? Well, ideally produce less of it by reusing and recycling as much as possible, and then safely disposing of what's left. This is really the sustainable approach, because it comes down to it. Produce less, reuse it, and then safely dispose of, what we actually have. Now, in a sense, we kind of have what we should do and what we do. And, it's not like it's always one or the other. Sometimes we're trying to work it in. Some countries, some cities, some towns do better than others, right? It's just the nature of how these things are. It comes to governing, and different people have different views. Well, let's talk waste management. Now, for the most part, we're talking about here municipal waste, like you and I generating trash. We have the solid waste. What do? Can be industry. Moving along. First off, right now, there's waste management. The question of waste management is, what do we do with it, right? Your job is to take care of the trash when people are throwing it out. And it's kind of like, what do we do with it? Now, waste management overall reduces the harm. We're going to put it somewhere where people aren't going to get hurt. We're going to take care of it. This is our classic landfill, right? We take the trash, we try and put it out. We'll have a hazardous waste facility where the hazardous waste is supposed to go, and general trash. Waste management, what do we do with it? They find an area to put it, store it, bury it, and we kind of move on. The other question is, how do we reduce it? And this is really the ultimate question that we need to be about on the planet. So many people, and there is no way. It's all on the planet. Now, waste reduction would focus on using less and reusing, recycling, and composting. Kind of going back to biomimicry, right? We want to try and mimic nature as much as possible, because there's virtually no waste in nature. There's no waste that builds up. It gets reused and recycled pretty quickly. Now, the reality of what we really need to do is integrated waste management. We talked about integrated pest management, right? We've talked about integrated farming methods, a little bit of chemical fertilizer, a little bit of compost. Well, this integrated method is really where we need to move. We have to realize we can't 100% do this or that. We've got to blend them and get the best of both worlds, if at all possible. In integrated waste management, that's all we're talking about, using a variety of coordinated strategies, if you will. Take a look at the graphic back here, and this is this, idea that we have. So we get the raw materials, whether we mine them, we're pulling them out of the air in something like nitrogen fertilizer, what have you. We get our raw materials, and these things get processed and turned into stuff, right? Manufactured in some shape, form, or fashion. And then we wind up with our solid waste. We're done with it. I have my bottle, now what do? I have my Coke can, what do? And this is where it comes down to. So some things should be recycled. So when we look at this graphic, we've got plastics, glass, metals, and paper. Well, these all need to be recycled. We can reuse these over and over and over. And this is what we need to do. It's cheaper, and they're not going into a landfill. All of our food and yard waste needs to be composted. Like when I mow my lawn, I don't catch the grass clippings or anything else. I just let them fall back in the ground, so they go back in and provide my natural fertilizer. Now, a couple of times a year, I do usually have to rake leaves. I get so many they would build up over time, in my lawn. But I really try to minimize my yard waste and compost as much as possible. I'll throw up a little video about a small compost bin that I made. Depending on your yard and where you're at, you may not be able to have a really big compost, but I can show you how to turn a 5-gallon bucket into a compost bin that'll take care of virtually all of your household waste. You're cutting up the tomatoes and there's a little bit you don't use, a little bit of leftovers, but you're not gonna keep them. All this can go in this little 5-gallon bucket, and it's kind of like a worm bin. The worms come in and eat it and carry it back out into the garden area. But this can go anywhere, just behind a bush in your front yard, and nobody would really notice it. Composting. A lot of this food doesn't need to go in the trash, doesn't need to go to the recycle bin. Let's get it back in the ground where it needs to be. Then we do get our hazardous waste, things that are made chemical. You know, I've got leftover paint, I've got turpentine, I've got thinner, whatever it might be, even some of a Drano, if you will. You know, some of our chemicals around the house, they really need to go to hazardous waste facilities. And then after we've done all of this, then we're only throwing away the small bits that can't be reused any other way. This is really the system that we really should try to follow. But we've got to sort of retool some of our manufacturing ideas to make sure that we're doing things in such a way that less waste is created. Kind of from the 60s, we'll just make it and put it out there. We really need to rethink how are we going to make it so that we can continually recycle it, reuse it. Taking us to the 4 R's. First off, refuse it. Don't use it. You know, you watch the ad, ooh, do you really need it? Don't buy it if you don't need it. Don't buy on impulse. Think about it. You know, we do that at our house all the time. Some people go, ooh, wow, that looks really nice. And we'll let it sit for a week. And sometimes we'll stick things in our cart, but we let it sit for a week. Do I really? Yeah, okay, if we do, we do. But don't just buy something because, ooh, it looks amazing. I watched the infomercial, right? Refuse it. Buy it only if you need it. Reduce. Use less of it. Can you cut down the amounts you're using? Reuse. Use it over and over again. You know, we get some containers and we continue to use those containers until they kind of break apart. If you see me in my classroom, I use everything, right? I reuse everything. We use little plastic cups. They don't go in the trash. We wash them out and I use them for another lab. Everything we try to do in the classroom, we use it, we clean it, we wash it, and we reuse it again. I use Ziploc bags over and over until they just begin to tear and shred. Reuse it as much as possible. Try and get away from this idea of a single, I'm going to use it once and throw it away. Even my little Publix bags, we hang on to them. I'll use them for packing if we're moving or something, putting them in and around. We'll reuse them to carry around. And then eventually when I do, I take them all into a recycle area because they turn these little plastic bags into some furniture and decking, all kinds of stuff. But make sure you're recycling it, which is the next one, recycle. Everything that can, convert all of these used resources into useful items. As much as possible, try and buy things from recycled materials. You know, when you're looking, ooh, this is from recycled materials. I know I've harped on it a bunch, but my car has a lot of recycled materials in it. Like the front part of the dash, when you look at it, I mean, it looks like recycled materials because they didn't try and clean it up and make it all shiny because that was what I wanted. I wanted to buy renewable stuff. And a lot of my car is made up of recyclable plastics. Look for it. You can buy things. Once again, the more we buy those things, the more people say, hey, that's what people want, and it changes the culture. And with recycle, remember, recycling means composting. We're going to let bacteria, right, decompose these biodegradable wastes, especially yard waste. Instead of throwing it out on the street, it's better to have some sort of compost bin. I say we have a fairly small yard, but I still run a small compost bin where we put all of our food waste in. My yard waste, I just cut my grass and I mulch it, right? I just let it sit in the garden about once a year, maybe twice. I get a few bags of leaves that I do send out. So, you know, there's a part. Maybe I could look at something better there, but I try to minimize as much as I can. And it's not that everybody has to do every possible little thing. You want to come into my yard and say, ooh, you're throwing those away. It's true, I do some, but I try to minimize it as much as possible. And that's what we're after. If we can all cut back a little bit, we all save 10 liters of water a day. That's a lot of water when you got 300 million Americans, right? We all cut our yard waste down some. It's a lot when we all do it. And this is the goal, to everybody learn to cut back. Now, On these 4 R's again that we come into, there's 6 strategies, if you will. First off, we need to really work to change the industrial processes to eliminate or reduce harmful chemicals. Like 3M, right? They started their anti-pollution campaign, paid employees who came up with ideas to reduce hazardous materials and waste. They've saved almost $2 billion by reducing and getting rid of hazardous materials. Retool as much as we can to not use these chemicals. A lot of times we were using it because it's what we've done, but there's a better process out there many times. Occasionally, there's no other way to go about it, but that's rarely the case. And we need to look at changing our culture in the manufacturing to eliminate and seriously reduce the use of our harmful chemicals. We need to redesign our manufacturing to use less materials. Cars, since the 60s, these things weigh like a fourth less than they used to. It used to be 2,500 to 3,000 pounds. Cars are down to like 1,500 now. They've using different materials, lighter materials, less of it. We got better with our engineering. We don't have to use as much. This is the goal. This is what we're after. Using less materials and less energy. We want to try and develop easy to recycle products. Can you make things that are kind of modular? This part broke and I can just replace this part, as opposed to I need to replace the whole thing. A lot of times just in our manufacturing design, man, this is where you guys come in. As you go out there and you get jobs in these places and we look at how are we building this thing, can we design it in such a way that we can use more recycled materials? Can we design it in such a way that it's more modular, that we can just replace this or this, and we don't have to toss out the whole thing? Can it be made that it can be upgraded later when we get this, or we can just replace this piece and have an upgrade instead of having to buy a whole brand new something else? We've got to rethink this idea, if you will. As much as possible, and the same thing, establish cradle to cradle responsibility. Instead of cradle to grave, recycling it back in. Our businesses out there, now some of them are pretty good about doing it. Best Buy, the AutoZone, use oil, you can take it back to them. Best Buy, you have a phone, electronic, you can take and they'll take it back. But most of our businesses need to adopt this. They need to take back the electronics or the items that we buy from them. We need to be able to take back to them so they can get them recycled, so they can reuse these parts. They need to have a better, more friendly system for my TV's dead and I bring it back to you instead of setting it out on the curb. This needs to be our idea, but businesses got to take the front end there. We've got to eliminate the unnecessary packaging. We need to minimize our packaging. So many times I buy something and it comes in the mail and it's in this big box, and inside of that box is all this plastic stuff, and then inside of that is another little box, and you open the little box and there's my package. You get the idea. The packaging could have been eliminated. Bulk foods at stores. I love stores that you can go and you get them out of the bin. We can take our own plastic thing that I keep it in my pantry, and I take that and I need to be able to just put it in that instead of having to put it in a bag and transfer it in or put it into something else. Once again, we need to make things as renewable, reusable as possible, and eliminating packaging is part of that. And one of the ways we sort of do this here in Gainesville, but we need to get a little better overall, is a fee per bag collection system. When it comes to waste management and I take it out to the curb, we probably should pay per bag. Now in Gainesville, what we do is you can buy different level trash bins. And if you didn't know this, you go into waste management and order the size you need. When we got to our house, we live in a small house, we had this massive container, because it's just the generic one. They kind of just give out their biggest trash container, and it costs, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number because I don't remember, $35 a month to take it. But then there's a smaller size down and a smaller size down and a smaller size down, and then you only pay like $20 a month for the smaller one because it can only handle a couple of kitchen garbage bags. But this is what we're talking about. Your recycling bins are free. There's no charge for them at all. Anything that goes in the recycling, they pick up for free. You only pay for the stuff that you don't recycle. So in a sense, I get paid to recycle my stuff. I minimize my amount of trash, so I just pay for a small trash container I put out at the street. This is what we mean by a fee per bag. It's not a generic price that everybody pays for the trash to be picked up. The more trash you generate, the more money you have to pay the waste management, so it's more on you to do the recycling. We get to recycle more stuff. Don't throw it away, refuse it, reuse it, reduce the amount that we have, and recycle it when at all possible. The graphic back here is just that, what we should do, just those 4 R's. And when it finally gets down to it does have to be thrown away, well, we incinerate it. Now, they didn't put the R of refuse because it's not in this thing. If we don't get it, it's not there. But I don't need it, so I don't buy it. But otherwise, reduce, don't buy as much, reuse, and like with plastic bags, a lot of times I'm in the grocery store, I take my own bags, but other times no, I don't need a bag. I can, I don't grab a bag, so I'm gonna go get one thing, and they still wanna throw it in a bag because that's what they're told to do, and that's fine. But no, just refuse a bag. I don't need the bag, I can carry it. I forgot my bags. You know what? At the store, just put it back in the cart. I'll put it in the bag when I get to my car. You don't have to use them. Refuse it. Reduce, reuse, recycle, then we incinerate and we bury kind of what's left. What we do is actually over here. 67% of it just gets buried. We're not doing a lot of this. We're just pitching it away and it's getting buried. About 23, almost 24% is getting recycled. We're incinerating about 9%, but what we should do, we really should burn more so we have less, but it costs energy to burn it. We're reusing about 0.2%, tiny percentage of stuff that we use it over and over again. Most people use it once and toss it. And then reduce less than 1%. Once again, what we should do versus what we do, not always the same thing. As you get out there and get in jobs and get in the business place and the marketplace and politics and all of this stuff, keep these things in mind and get your company on the front end of this. You'll save your company money, and we're doing what's right for the environment and everybody down the road, right? Well, that's it for today, section 2. Come back next time and we'll talk about reducing our solid waste.